So, welcome, Nika Nour. Thank you so much for being part of Conversations with Comic-Con. I'd like to dive straight in and talk about your absolutely incredible career so far. And for the audience at home, would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nika Nour. I'm usually based out of Orange County, California. I am an avid gamer. I absolutely love video games. I love comic books. I was a weirdo growing up and completely stigmatized for it, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm one of the few who, I grew up in a household where video games were banned and an absolute no-no, so I've turned it around and made it a full-time career. And it just definitely proves that there's no one true path to, achievements or dreams or passions. And that's really been the foothold of everything I've done. Is I've been very relentless about not taking jobs or gigs that I absolutely had zero interest in. And I've literally only pursued things that I absolutely love and adore. Sometimes it's collecting Batman figurines, and other days it's trying to advocate for people who are from underrepresented communities and ensure that they do have jobs and opportunities. So I was really lucky. I very much lucked out.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, because I mean, you've had such a varied career. It's actually quite amazing. In fact, you're working with the energy, commerce, and minorities when you served in the US Representatives, House of Representatives, right. Sorry. And I just wanted to know what it was that made you want to leave that kind of behind and go into gaming full time.
Yeah, my first job, I mean, it's very strange. I graduated in that 2008 economy when things weren't going well. And I realized that there was not a lot of great digital democratization of how we engage between government and US citizens. And so kind of using my background as a programmer, complete, technology, hardware geek, I ended up getting my first job on Capitol Hill. And, being one of very few individuals who understood the importance of making sure that IT hardware and constituent communications was really important, right? This is the age of getting representatives to understand how to use Facebook and Twitter to communicate with civilians, with their constituents. I mean, it was where we are today. You have to understand, I started my career literally trying to explain how Twitter worked and where the power button was on laptops in government. And that's how from there I ended up leaving Capitol Hill, because internet policy became a big deal. People cared about privacy. People cared about net neutrality. Internet companies were booming. Startups definitely had a big bubble, and Silicon Valley is taking off in a way where Washington, D.C. is starting to notice what's going on and how we look at digital policy as a whole. So I left to go work at the Internet Association. And while I was at the Internet Association, a little adventure called Gamergate hit. And that's when the White House brought in all of these leaders from video game companies to discuss the consistent and relentless harassment of women and gender underrepresented communities. And I happened to be, this is literally how I got my job in games. I happen to be known in DC for my love of video games and Batman and my previous work in tech policy. So I was invited to that meeting, and out of that meeting, I was offered a job in games. Just a very, very zigzagged approach, but it was just, being a brown woman in games, people, even though, you just want to build robots and develop websites and cool campaigns, when diversity becomes a topic, when it's all of a sudden in vogue, when a company is in trouble, usually the first response from leadership is to turn around and find, an apt woman of color or person of color or woman and turn around and make it her job to fix the problem. As if people who are women, non-binary, or from a certain race can actually go through and represent an entire population suddenly overnight, which isn't fair. It's not right. But that is kind of the weird way I ended up into this role at the IGTA Foundation through, 10 years of being asked by my male peers and, supervisors, oh, how do we fix this woman problem? How do we help whatever? I had to self-educate. I had to learn. Nobody grows up saying, oh, what I want to be when I grow up is a chief, diversity officer. And so I felt compelled, because the role kept getting, put on my plate. I might as well, because it is helping people. If not me, then who? There are very limited people from underrepresented communities in positions of power or authority or even decision-making positions.
Yeah, that's true. And gosh, to be expected to kind of solve all those problems in just one person, I mean, sure. Yeah, but you've come so far. As we're saying now, the general conception is that gaming is a male-dominated industry, and I guess it actually is. But how do we encourage more women then to take up their controllers and be part of development and gaming casually and?
Right. I mean, you'll see the stats and you'll see what's out there, right? In terms of play and player use, right? We have a pretty diverse representation of gamers. The community of people who play with the product, the community of people in those aspects are there, but there's definitely pockets of toxicity that are real. Some people will want to turn a blind eye and be like, oh, it's getting better. Sure. Every day after 2014, 15, hopefully would get better, right? You would hope we're moving forward. But in terms of the gamer component, our workforce isn't as representative or as diverse as the people who play games. And that makes zero sense, right? The barrier to play is so low. This isn't as physical as like football or soccer or weight, height, mass, matter, right? This is picking up a controller, making sure that it is accessible for some that need the adaptability and accessibility component when dealing with technology of any sorts. But in terms of the workforce, I agree that it's better. It's nice that we're having conversations, but it's nice, right? Like nobody goes to pick up a nice cake. No, they want a great cake. You want to, and we're not there. And it's not about like, oh, how do we get more women in? How do we get more of these people in? Which seems to be everyone's number one question, right? You talk to any company, how do I do this? How do I find women? I gotta tell you, people are so lazy. They're so lazy. We run a grantee program just specified for people around the world that are minorities in terms of gender underrepresentation, location underrepresentation, economic backgrounds, ethnic diversity and inclusion. And we receive so many applications for our program. And that's just a little program where we're doing a call to action to support individuals and bring them to GDC or, figure out what we've done virtually. So I definitely think there's an air of laziness. The second thing is, I don't believe that there's a whole lot of a recruitment problem. It's a retention problem. Because when these individuals walk through the doors, right, imagine like you go through your whole life, your entire collegiate career, your high school, your whatever, being really passionate about a product. And then you walk through the doors, you finally made it, you're in your entry-level position, and somebody makes a comment or doesn't treat you well, or you don't get promoted based on the skin you're born in, based on the gender that you couldn't help. There's these obstacles that get put in place where then people don't feel welcome. So the natural response is to leave a not awesome situation, right? Just like when the world is open, like think about how we make choices about where we eat, what bars we go to, what brands we shop at. You go where you feel good. And if your employees don't feel good, if they feel like they're being targeted or passed up on opportunities specifically for things they can't change, that's why we have this retention problem. That's the core crux of a lot of these comments and stuff you see going on right now and the nonstop allegations And that's what we're solving for.
I feel like you have the most immense position that you've taken on here. It's incredible. And you touched also now on women and the fact in gaming and esports and the fact that, it's not about mass hype, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I really feel like esports could be the great leveler of sports, and especially with the revenue of esports going up so much, like exponentially, which I'm really excited about. I can't wait to see where women take esports.
Yeah, and esports is such an interesting landscape and community, because the games, and this is the thing about games that people outside of the industry, or if you go through mainstream media, they don't understand. You have the video game industry as a whole, but there are so many facets within that ecosystem. You have publishers, game developers, the esports community, right? The independent developer community, the executive community. And esports is this very strange and fascinating and Wild West kind of scenario where, it's so new. It's like, oh man, I wish it was done right from the beginning. Because the barrier to play esports is nothing. It's literally just pick up the controller and go. But again, you walk through the stadiums, you walk through high school clubs, you walk through various platforms, and you will just see lots and lots of men. There's just still that stigma exists, but when you're, especially of that age, the esports community is specifically a young community. When you're of that age, right? Like, how many women, how many gender underrepresented communities want to spend all day, train all day, every day with a group of dudes, right? Think about it, because these individuals, especially these professional players, they train nonstop. They have breakfast together. Sometimes they have shared houses. They do nutritional plans together. I mean, you're building a team. And you have to think about it in that capacity. And then you also have to think about, where privacy comes in as a whole, but also remember that parents are still involved, because esports players are very young. And there's this disparity too, with parents not understanding the esports industry, not understanding games. And so some of it is you have families and, whatever's going on at home that doesn't necessarily, promote or support or even recognize that video games are an option or an avenue for women, because you look at the marketing aspect of it. If you look at career choices and you go back, there's a study that demonstrates that most young women, young girls, they have an impression of what careers are available to them between ages 5 through 7. And that's why you see where Mattel and Barbie started making a push for new careers for Barbie, new skin colors, etc., because they realized that those toys are so impressionable.
Absolutely. And that's, when you form a lot of your opinions that follow you for life.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So getting into that, I mean, your goal as executive director of IGTA, the International Game Developers Association Foundation, is to create more opportunities for women and LGBTQ plus people and minorities and underrepresented people. So you've been in the position for a little while now, and I'm just wondering how it's going so far and what your sort of plans are for the next 6 months.
Yeah. The IGTA Foundation is such an interesting nonprofit because it's very dynamic. In most industries, when you think about corporate social responsibility, when you think about nonprofit work, when you think about diversity and inclusion, companies always look at it, or the larger associations always look at that aspect as this kind of fluffy, feel good component that helps the community in some way. But because of the nature of games and where we're at in terms of diversity and inclusion progress, for us, it is a real grind. I mean, it is a very taxing job because so many people have so many traumatic experiences that are so hostile. At the same time, we're in this unique position to grab talent early on, foster them, and put them or position them to, work with awesome people in awesome companies that we have identified that we continue to work with when we look at diversity and inclusion planning. So the flagship programs that the IGTA Foundation usually hosts, typically we run 3 grantee programs out of Game Developers Conference, an in-person conference in San Francisco. It is kind of like the mecca of making sure that you got to meet with other independent developers, create games. It's very, very exciting. I absolutely love the conference. I'm a big fan of the organizers. And our 3 programs we have the IGDA Scholars, and the Scholars is a global recipient program where we bring in individuals from all levels of educational backgrounds that are minorities. We have the Velocity program where we're looking at women and non-binary individuals who are looking for their first job in games, or they might have been out of games for a while and are like, okay, I'm ready to give it another try. And then our third is next gen leaders, individuals that are again, from various communities, but are mid-career, years 3 through 7. This year, we accepted about 60 global grantees from 14 different countries.
Wow.
And we had booked flights, we booked hotels, we had the whole 9 yards. And of course, health being a number one priority, we ended up having to cancel. And it was absolutely devastating.
Oh.
We didn't know, right? Because you have so many individuals. I mean, we get them excited for a long time. We put out our call for applications, the October prior. So you have people who are so excited, have been waiting for months and months. They bought a new pair of sneakers and a Fitbit and a water bottle and battery packs so that they could, hydrate and go through this conference. And what happens is when it canceled, I went into, some people were optimistic, this virus is going away. I went straight into apocalypse mode. It wasn't, I didn't see anything in the stars. I studied biodefense and infectious diseases for 2 years out of George Mason University.
Yeah.
So it's funny, I never thought this degree would come to help, to be useful. Yeah. But I immediately was like, let's go into the worst case scenario. I love emergency preparedness planning because that's literally how I've workshopped out every decision of my life. The best case, worst case, medium case scenario. And I still remember that 2008 economy that I graduated in. It was very hard for me to find a job. I worked for free for months. And I remember knocking on doors with my resume. I've had my resume thrown away in front of me. I've had people look me up and down because I did not know how to dress. I had people look me up and down and just tell me that the job wasn't there, clearly not physically making a great first impression. And none of this is like a sad story. I was just kind of fumbling my way through how the hell do I get a freaking job? Yeah. I literally couldn't figure it out. And so I just really, really remember that year and how hard it was. And I told the grantees, I said, I'm not waiting a year when it comes to your career growth and development. Our nonprofit, the IGTA Foundation, might not even exist next year, right? Because funding is starting to dry up. Budgets are getting cut. This is a year where not only, our small business suffering, nonprofit suffering, but people didn't know what to do. So there was a hoarding mentality. Lots of people were losing their jobs. Lots of people were grabbing, in at least North America, toilet paper.
Same here.
I did not understand. But that's why I said, if this is literally our final year, especially with everything we lost in flights and hotels, then let's go virtual. We're going to do something. We're going to figure it out. And it's been some time. Not only have we found success in going virtual. We're definitely going to make it till next year. A lot of people from around the world chipped in individually. A lot of companies came forward to support our 60 grantees, because you now have 60 people stuck in isolation, some without jobs, some, they're at home with their parents trying to interview, and mom's walking in the background yelling about dinner. I have another grantee whose kid's crawling all over her while she's trying to, conduct an interview. So we started our virtual program, and we had at least 10 companies come in, and we have literally been creating content, live streams, pre-recorded, going through topics, vetting questions, created a community on Discord, resume reviews, job postings, getting people freelance gigs, and it's still ongoing. We're probably going to be doing it for another month or 6 weeks. But that has been the thing we're working towards, is how do you connect people and open doors from your laptop at home?
That's incredible. I mean, especially at these times. So, I mean, I feel like you've got a really sort of realistically optimistic approach to things. But I mean, at times it must be really frustrating. Just feeling like you're hitting against a brick wall.
Oh, in May, definitely. There was a point in April, May, I so remember going like, shit. How are we going to pull through? Because I must have called over 100 studios and companies, right, for sponsorships or et cetera. And not that like we were down in the dumps, right? But again, I'm very fiscally conservative. I love making sure that there's enough in the bank for next year. I like to make sure there's, food on the table for tomorrow. I'm very budget minded. I'm very pragmatic about my approach to just running a small nonprofit in this case, because I don't want to build for success for just today. I want to make sure that our solutions are there tomorrow. It takes generations to create real change in workforce and smaller opportunities when it comes, because you are facing years and years and years of stigmas and bias when it comes to race and gender. That you are asking people to either shut down or reprogram, or to ignore that piece of themselves and just randomly accept whoever's in front of them. It shouldn't have to be that way. Whatever you look like shouldn't matter. I almost feel like, in a way, we've been bizarrely more successful on Zoom, right? I'm a 5-foot woman, but nobody knows that. Everybody thinks I'm this like taller, gregarious human being. Just because we've done so many Zoom calls. But, and I feel like that's gone away. I actually do find that the silver lining of this is, by not having to go to conferences and pitch a lot, as a female ED, I don't have to deal with weird sexist disparaging comments or wandering eyes, or wondering if, my adult beverage is safe at the bar or not. I actually have been kind of enjoying the idea that I can just get what I need done and be done with it. I don't have to think about that. I don't have to, have a safety buddy to text when I need to walk home late night from a meeting. That aspect has been really nice. I'm not gonna lie.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, because that's the ideal, isn't it? You don't want people to think about your gender. You don't want people to think about your skin color or anything about what you look like, because it's just not relevant, is it?
No. How cute is she? Or how, she's so small, or right. And again, just like creepy comments at a reception, don't have to deal with it. If I don't like the conversation, I just have to turn off the laptop.
Yeah, that is very cool. It's kind of like the world we imagined but haven't got to.
I know. This is all I've wanted. This is all I've ever wanted.
Yeah, exactly. And Liminal Esports is a very interesting initiative, and I see it's about teaching the new generation new media skills. So I was just wondering how the first year of Liminal has been. And also, can I just say, I think that is an absolutely great name for for it.
Yeah.
Liminal
Esports is awesome. It is an LGBTQ plus owned studio and company. And our CEO is Jay Collins. Jay is someone I worked with, years ago. I can't believe it's been years, but years ago at the Department of Education. And it was an opportunity that, quite frankly, when Jay asks me to do something, I definitely do it, because Jay is a very thoughtful individual who thinks about games. I mean, he takes the crux of, you know, what I've been trying to do for diverse and underrepresented communities. I mean, they take it to the next level, and they're very just thoughtful about how we take STEM education, how we integrate it in classrooms, how we actually teach camaraderie and friendship and sportsmanship with individuals. And I have been an absolute fan of everything they've done. And everything from trying to figure out how to prototype games for young women to figuring out how games can actually foster educational growth and expand those horizons out of traditional markets when it comes to learning, I think is really, really smart. And so with Liminal especially, it's one of those things where I will do almost anything Jay asks, because there is no project that Jay is working on that isn't fostering a supportive environment, an inclusive environment. And I have my blind spots. We all have our blind spots. But I've had a hard time finding a blind spot when it comes to Jay as the CEO of Liminal Esports. And so every product and every project that comes out of that shop has just been something that actually adds value, you know, tangible value to game creation. And that's why I love that company so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, do you think we are making progress? Like, are we kind of getting there?
Yeah, I mean, we're having conversations. I get asked all the time. It's almost overwhelming. I've had to tell people I'm not HR, but I get asked all the time for talent. Hey, I'm looking for specifically diverse talent for this role. I have no women on my tech team. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I've had really busy, more of your small to medium companies, leaders really want to make an effort, but you know, they are running a company. And so I've had a lot of questions there. And I think that conversation is good. I think that awareness is good. It has pushed, you know, some questionable behaviors out, right? Like you see people, you know, defending or fighting back against diversity inclusion. I don't fully, I mean, it's not a popular opinion. I don't fully see that as a negative, as having, you know, these angry people come out of the woodworks, because and now I know exactly who they are and to stay away, right? Yeah. I'd rather know that somebody disagrees with the principles of diversity and inclusion versus not know and waste my time and have lunch with them.
Yeah. And kind of to understand the beast that we're working with as well. Like the more you can sort of see into their mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, look, to each their own. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I now know, you know, I don't waste my time arguing with the extremes. I don't waste my time arguing with the extremes. I don't waste my time trying to convince people that can't be convinced. I also don't walk around trying to punish or cancel them, because every minute spent on those more narrow-minded individuals is a minute or hour taken away from our grantees that I could be spending opening doors and introducing them to awesome people. And that's really it. And especially with social media and this global pandemic, you spend a lot of time parsing through what is a good use of my time versus what's going to make my heart groan. And anything that makes my heart groan is not worth doing. Yeah. Time is the one commodity. It is the one commodity in this world you cannot buy back.
Yeah. So. That is such an amazing attitude. And I mean, I was going to sort of touch on, I think you've answered it already. I was going to kind of touch on what you do when you come across these kind of toxic people who take away from your sort of life force, you know? So I think great response. Don't waste your time on them. Just kind of move forward and accomplish things.
Yeah.
So there's one thing that's not about gaming, but it's about your work on the TV show Spy Games. Yeah. That must have been so awesome. It looks like an interesting show. And I mean, what kind of role did you take in the development of that content?
Yeah, I know. I know this is where whenever I get asked about spy games, my like business executive hat comes off because I get so shy about it. And not shy, it's just such a weird thing that I never thought I'd do, but I do. I always get a little sheepish, like, oh yeah, that thing where I like cried on television, publicly a few times. No, Spy Games was an awesome, awesome experience. It was also a terrifying experience for me, at least. So, Spy Games is an idea where 10 random individuals from all walks of life get shoved into a house together, and you live together and you are kind of competing against one another in individual competitions while trying to learn about each other's life secrets.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you are actually being judged by former FBI, CIA, and Secret Service individuals that are very intimidating.
Oh,
and the thing, and the thing about that is I obviously had never intended or kind of like applied to be on reality TV or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, screw it. Like this, I'm so competitive. And I was like, all right, life is about experiences. Let's do it. I was so out of my comfort zone. I was so out of my wheelhouse. You give me a reporting structure. You give me a policy to create a campaign about. You give me a team to negotiate deliverables and figure out how we're going to execute and connect people and deal with contracts and companies. I can do that, with my eyes closed and hands tied behind my back. You put me in an environment, though, where you're being filmed 24/7. Everybody's makeup game is so good, right? I went in there. I had never had an Instagram account,
Yeah.
I've never been like a take pictures of me or
selfies.
Of that, right? I used to be like 30, 40 pounds overweight, right? Mm-hmm. So I've never been in this like position of like look good and be filmed and be, and I was completely myself. There was nothing, there was no acting, right? But I was constantly, and it was a different feeling. I was constantly uncomfortable because to have cameras on you and to do something completely different than anything I've ever done, which is also to lie to people for weeks and weeks straight. It was just the worst. I cannot lie. Like you can tell anyone in that house that paid attention, you can definitely tell when I'm lying. I mean, those assessors, those secrets are like, they knew when I was lying. I could see that there's this one assessor, I'll never forget her face. Her name was Evie Pumporis. And she, like, I could see her hinting at other competitors that like, can't you tell when like somebody is lying or overcompensating? And I was like, that's me. I'm so sorry. Like I was apologizing all the time because I just felt bad. Right? Like you go from like working with hundreds of people a week, having honest, transparent conversations, business meetings. My entire brand, my entire life has been to build authentic relationships and to really fight for a cause in some way, whether it's a tech policy campaign or diversity. And this whole mess was just like me trying to keep my shit together. And they'd throw us off of buildings. They'd do all this, like my absolute worst nightmares, just over and over. It was it was definitely very difficult. I had a hard time with it.
Sure, so that was a growing period, I can imagine.
Yes, yeah. So definitely learned a lot of lessons, but it was really, really cool. I mean, when do you ever get to like break yourself out of handcuffs in the freezing cold? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. So you've just said apologizing all the time. So I'm kind of going back a little bit here. But I feel like as a woman in business, I often sort of, preface emails with I feel or I believe, as opposed to kind of making it as a full statement, like this is, and I don't know how as women we kind of stop apologizing for how we feel sometimes. I mean, I think society kind of tells you how to be. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of made you be so confident. I mean, is it a kind of a personal connection to the work that you do, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very tied. I'm very tied. I'm actually trying to become less attached, but I'm very tied and very passionate about what I work on. That's what I mean. I exclusively, which is hard, right? I've exclusively been like, I will only do things that make me want to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the freaking point?
Mm.
But I have not always been, right?
Mm.
I've always been confident kind of growing up. I had a tougher childhood. I was definitely not confident. I didn't really get friends until I was like 16, which is right strange. Like my friend was YouTube when it came out.
Yeah.
But it's because I learned to kind of find my tribe within the technology culture, within video game culture, and then learned that in order to succeed, you do have to be, at least in the environments that I was working in, you had to be sure of yourself. You had to know your shit. I mean, you just did. I mean, and that's the thing is when I finally was getting a kick in my career, I totally saw the microaggressions, etc.
Yeah.
And just realized, things are not going to be handed to me. And especially like if you are a woman, if you are, person of color, if you are gender underrepresented, it's not the same, right? You're not going to be the white guy. Oh, you're good. You're not going to be the white guy at the business table who says something with confidence and everybody agrees. So I knew I had to know my shit. I mean, I was up early. I would read. I would prepare. I'd have talking points. I would drill the knowledge, make sure that I was so good at what I was doing that I had enough evidence and enough claims to back up anything I presented. I created polished proposals every time I wanted something through and put it right in front of the boss's boss. Not all of these tactics are helpful, but there was a way to kind of work through, your office politics, but make sure that you are so good that you cannot be discounted. And that's really, I mean, and it's a lot of extra hours. Is it fair? I don't know. But I made sure I always woke up early. I read the news. I kept up with the trends. I looked at the reports. And so that when an answer came in, when a question came in, I was ready and I was never caught flat-footed. And that's at least what I had to do. Everybody's different. But for me, being overprepared really helped support, because at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that there was no excuse that anybody around me could say, oh, well, she's not this, or, oh, well, she's not. And that way I never had to apologize because I trained harder or I worked harder. And that's really what it was. I don't recommend this for everyone. But for me, I was constantly making sure that I just outworked, all the peers or potential hostile actors to ensure that, when it came time for a promotion or a raise, I wanted a real evidence-based claim as to why I wasn't eligible. And I made sure that there was no room for excuse. And that's the part where systematically you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to have, balance and wellness, et cetera. And this goes back to, it's almost not about finding, the job you want, but making sure you're working. And this is what I learned the hard way. But, pick a good boss, not the job you think you want. Because a good boss wouldn't make you jump through 20 hoops, and your laundry piles up because you're, trying to read and grasp everything and have it together. But you have to make sure that there's no excuse for somebody else to point at you and say, oh, see, she missed the mark on this, which happened every day.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I think, like you say, you shouldn't have to jump through those 20 hoops, but look how it's driven you to excellence, So I don't know if that's a kind of a silver lining, but yeah.
It's the way of the world. And I mean, that's where I'm so aggressive with our grantee programs. And, we don't tell people what to do, but we do work on opening the doors and, creating the opportunities for them to walk through more sustainable doors, right? There's a difference between resilience, yesterday I was talking to the COO of Iron Galaxy Studios, Chelsea Blasco. Yeah. She said something beautiful. There's a difference between the resilience of like, you know, being a team and getting through something and hard work and grit and hitting your milestones or getting a product out the door versus just being abused. And that's the tricky thing. That's where the I'm sorry's come in and you're not so sure of yourself. Is because we have a very difficult time when you're in the trenches of working, you have a very difficult time parsing through, is this an abusive workplace? Or am I just really excited to grind through this fantastic project? And that's the trick. That's the mess that we're kind of wading through. And I know so many of my peers that are executives who can relate.
Yeah, gosh. So I'm going to take it a little bit lighter now, because obviously Business of Gaming Forum is connected to Comic-Con Africa. And you've given us a hint already, but I know that you're a big DC fan. We've seen your gorgeous earrings and your Wonder Woman jacket. And so I'm thinking that Batman is going to be your favorite character in DC.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, Batman is how I got hired, because that was my, like, so when I first started when I got my first job, my actual real job, I had a job that like paid me $500 a month. But when I got like a real life adult salary, which was, you know, not very much, I was so excited to have a workplace. And it wasn't even like a full office. It was just kind of like a desk, and I was surrounded by printers that I wanted to make my own. And so I brought in all of my Batman collectibles. And at the time, I only had a few. But one thing I negotiated in that job is that I absolutely had to take time off every year to go to Comic-Con International. I grew up going to Comic-Con. I loved cosplaying and doing all the contests, waiting forever for Hall H. Going to Comic-Con before it was, at least in San Diego, before it was big. And so my Batman collection started growing, because every year I went, I had to bring back something. And then when I moved from office to office, finally, maybe 3 jobs later, I have my own office. And Warner Brothers is one of the companies that we worked with. And every time I took an executive to Capitol Hill or walked through something, they would send me a Batman memorabilia as a thank you gift. And people started bringing out their really old Batman collectibles from their garages. So because I was known around town for having this like Batman shrine in my office, I mean, I literally had a desk that was just for my laptop, and then I was surrounded by it. And I love Batman. Space. And I think I love Batman because as a character, Batman is a self-made, you know, justice warrior, and I kind of prided myself on like working through the projects I had to, but then at night I was helping, you know, communities get jobs and connect them. And I was working in the structure and the ecosystem. And that's it's more about the spirit of like, right? And that's what I hope the IGTA Foundation is. If you put up the bat signal that for someone in the community who's trying to work through or navigate their career choices, that's where IGDAF comes to the rescue and makes solid connections. Or when a company is ready to hire a head of diversity or rescope their principles, that they call us. And so I always joke for us that like we have a Batman Robin infrastructure within the IGDA Foundation, which can be quite confusing for some.
Well, that is very cool. So, Nika, thank you so much for chatting with us today. We're super excited to welcome you to the Business of Gaming Forum this September. So yeah, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to chat with you.
No, you too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks so much.